So, good afternoon, everyone. You're welcome to the Raise workshop session today. As you know, the title of today's workshop is How to Hire and Retain the Right Staff for Your Company Correctly. Okay, so I'll be your host today. My name is Ozzy. I'm the business to customer lead at Raise. I basically handle sales and basically engineer the sales journey of a customer from when they discover Raise to their entire journey while navigating the Raise platform. So without further ado, I'm just going to hand over to my fellow panelists and the speakers, honorable speakers for today's event. So I'll just let Danai take it away for today.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Very excited to be here and engage with you. My name is Danai. I lead the talent acquisition team at The Room. And at The Room, we are providing a global network of tech talent with the relationships and resources that can just help them thrive. So we provide them with ongoing training across different verticals from software engineering, data analysts, financial analysts, developing their technical and professional skills so that we can place them into opportunities that will amplify their impact. But I will pause here for now and pass on to Ms. Anne.
Thank you, Danai, and it's amazing to be on the same panel with some of the distinguished panelists. So I'll just quickly introduce myself. My name is Missan, and I work as the head of people and culture at a company called Sparkle. So essentially what I do at Sparkle is that I basically set up the organization, the culture, and people in a way that enables the business to scale. So just a bit about my company. So we're a digital bank. We're licensed by the CBN. And basically what we've built is to create a digital platform that makes it easy for both individuals and small businesses to be able to make payments, save, manage their money, and all of the works. All right, so I'll just hand over to Patience now.
Thank you, Ms. Sun. My name is Patience Amber. I'm a legal engineer at Raise. A little bit about Raise is that Raise is an equity management platform in Africa. And so what I do in my capacity is that I provide assistance to companies with their onboarding and cap table management. Thank you. I'll pass it on to Daniel.
Yeah, hello, everybody. And yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Daniel Faloppa. I'm originally from Italy, but now living in the Netherlands for more than 10 years. I'm the founder and CEO of Equidam. Our goal is to make sure that valuation is not a deal breaker between entrepreneurs and investors. We have an online platform to help the calculation of valuation for all startups and investors as well. And yeah, looking forward to share my side, maybe more on the valuation and finance of the hiring equation. So very looking forward to the panel.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for your very interesting introductions. As you can see, guests of this workshop, we have very, very distinguished speakers in our panel session today. I'm actually quite excited about how today's conversation is going to go. So as you know, the title of this workshop event is How to Hire and Retain the Right People for Your Startup. So as you know, my name is Ozzy, I'm your host, and we're just going to kick on this conversation. And everyone in the audience, I really want you to get involved as much as possible. So feel free to throw in your comments, feel free to throw in the questions or suggestions you may have in the section for Q&A, or raise your hand if you have a suggestion. However, I'd like us to just kick off the conversation. So I'll start with my opening sentence, and my opening sentence, while that goes out, there's going to be a poll that also go out also, so the audience can participate in the conversation. So my very first question to the panelists is, in today's work culture, what factor would you say directly influences how a company retains its staff and basically basically influences the decisions that the staff makes as to whether or not they want to keep working there, or as to whether or not they make a decision to join your company. So is it like the culture of the company? Is it the pay? Is it the service offered? Is it just the hype around the company? You know, what are the factors that you would say from your experience are that directly really affect decisions that a potential employee or an employee in keeping in choosing a company? Yeah. So this is an open question to anyone from the audience, so feel free to take it away from the panelists rather.
I can share some insights. I think it depends on where people are, because I think we have different personas during the job search process. So depending on where you are, the things you prioritize might be a little bit different. So when I think about a lot of like more seasoned professionals that join, especially that join startups, for example, that might be a bit more mission driven. They're now probably at that stage in their career where they've made quite a lot of money in whatever it is they were doing, and they're looking for a little bit more impact. And that would be the draw, because you find there's some people who take pay cuts to go and join an organization because they're looking for things that are more, you know, intrinsic. What impact or what legacy do I want to leave behind? Whereas you can also find another person who's at a stage where what really drives them at that time is they just want to earn a boatload of money. So the kind of companies they apply to are companies that can give them that. But as a company, when you are thinking about, I guess, your edge, right? The very basics are sell your mission, right? What is it you're trying to do? So that you're showing somebody that they're bigger than themselves. And then potentially what culture you're building. So a lot of people love to work with smart and talented people because they feel like they can learn a lot. So that could be a selling point that you share to draw people in. And they also want to work on meaningful projects. So make sure that you're giving them opportunities to work on things that can help them grow and excel. So those would be the bare generic things, caveat by the fact that people want different things at different stages in their careers.
That's actually a very, very interesting perspective, Danai, that you shared. I think 3 things I picked up on was working with smart, intelligent people. I mean, who doesn't like working with smart people? Because you literally absorb and learn from them. And also you want to be associated with people that are considered smart. I think a follow-up question that I have as to what you shared, and again, this is still open to the panelists to share. When you talk about like how a company wants to present themselves, how do you, like, are there specific ways or is there a criteria as to how a company needs to present themselves in terms of creating a perception when they're looking to hire people?
Hi, everyone. Okay, I'll take this question. I think in terms of, you know, creating like a great employer brand, it's very important that, first of all, you think very deeply and you're very intentional about your talent attraction strategy. So like Danai has said, you need to be very intentional about what it is that, for instance, if you're a startup, what is it that you're trying to build? And how clear is the messaging around, you know, what it is that you're trying to achieve? And is that easy for people to see that? Where are you posting the information? Is it, you know, very accessible to the kind of people that you're targeting? Even in terms of the messaging around like your jobs itself, like when you're posting jobs, what kind of, how are you structuring the wording around the job descriptions? Is it attractive enough to the kind of people that you're trying to attract? Are you very transparent when it comes to pay, when it comes to benefits? Those are things that you need to be very clear about if you're looking to attract a certain type of people. So I think it's just, for me, it's just more so around like transparency around, you know, what it is that you're willing to offer as an employer, whether it's from your mission, whether it's from your brand, whether it's, you know, the people that are working with you. You need to, you know, put all the information out there so that it's easy for whoever is, you know, looking to join your company or is interested in working with your company. They can see all of the information, whether it's on your, you know, website or even right on the job description itself or wherever they might find your company, whether it's social media. You need to be very intentional about the kind of messaging that you're putting out there and, you know, what you want your employer to see. what you want your potential employees to see. Sorry.
Yes, very, very, very interesting perspective, Miss. And I think that's so important because a lot of times, I remember when I first started working, one of my initial experiences was I was always so critical about how the potential employers were seeing me. Whereas as time went on, I realized that when I went for interviews further down my career, I was actually thinking about, like, you know, what kind of company is this? Is this a company I want to be associated with? You know, paying attention to the recruitment posts, paying attention to the language they use, because like you just mentioned, you know, like the choice of words you use in while you put out your recruitment post is also important because it sends out the perception. So this brings me to my next question, and I'm going to actually direct this question to Daniel. So this is about valuation. So as a valuations expert, Dan, how do you say, or rather, let me rephrase this. How does the team associated with a startup affect their valuations, in your own opinion, based on your experience? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so the team, right, at an early stage is extremely important, right? So it's almost the only thing. Like milestones and like how far the company got already are very important as well. But other than that is the team, right? We're talking pre-seed and seed, let's say. And then as the company develops, traction develops, and the team also gets larger, right? Then it's less critical. The way that it affects the valuation is because just valuation is about the future, right? And so if the team can deliver or not, that's a huge factor in understanding whether the company can deliver or not in the future, especially when they just started. Having said that, I really think you shouldn't think too much about how your valuation is going to change according to who you hire. You should just hire the best people for the company, and then the valuation will reflect that on its own. I see, you know, some people that hire for the number of logos they can put in a pitch deck when they go raise capital, and you know that's definitely not the best way, in my opinion.
Awesome. Very interesting. It's interesting that you answered my follow-up question already before I actually directed the question to you. So basically, I was going to ask, like, should startups actually consider hiring with the aim of increasing valuation? Because, you know, I think I've been in several group conversations where I've seen people talk about like how it's such a great thing to have people that hire people that have like MBAs and people that have like you know, all these exotic certificates. Yeah. And I mean, like that's amazing. While it's really good to have you know, people with that level of caliber on your team, I do like the fact that you've pointed out that you shouldn't necessarily seek out to hire people based on that criteria. You know, that shouldn't be your aim, like trying to build some form of Avengers squad or something.
Yeah, indeed. Anything, right? Anything that is done only for the valuation, I think. Or like to boost in some strange way the valuation for a funding round instead of actually trying to make the company more successful and more future-proof is, I don't think the best strategy. I think another interesting thing on the connection of the two is the opposite, right? When people try to boost their valuation just to hire more, right? And that's actually because you get a lot of PR, right? If it's a fast-growing company, and also a lot of people want to join these companies where the valuation is skyrocketing, right? So the opposite is done maybe even more, which is also probably not very advisable, because then you have what's happening now after the contraction of valuations after the COVID hype, and then you have a problem with equity incentives for employees as well.
Very, very interesting. So it's a whole domino effect. Thanks so much for sharing that, Daniel. Okay, so this leads me to my follow-up question, because Daniel has just mentioned stock options. So I'm going to come to our stock options expert in the room, which is no one else but Patience. So my question to you, Patience, now is, Raise being an equity distribution and fundraising management platform, following your experience, how would you say equity distribution helps startups hire and retain the right right people. Because I hear people talk about it a lot, like, oh, people even go like, oh my God, you work in a startup, that means you have stock options. That's amazing. But then I think to myself, like, is this really the solution? Is this really what would make people not want to leave a company? I mean, because stock options also have vesting schedules attached to them. So just give us a bit of insight around that.
Thank you, Ozzy. So I think when you're talking about equity distribution, the conversation around it basically is that a lot of company leaders believe that it's an important tool when it comes to hiring and retaining employees. However, recent reports move the conversation a bit differently, and it's that equity distribution alone cannot suffice to reduce employee attrition, which is basically employees exiting the company or a startup. And the reason for this is that, as you stated, the vesting schedules tend to be a very stringent measure because you cannot exercise your stock options until they're fully vested on you. So what we find is that there's the traditional equity design plan, which is basically the 4-year vesting schedule, and you have to wait it out as an employee until the 4 years are completed for you to start exercising your ESOPs. Or you can now focus on the new method that is being used by companies, which is an early exercise. But that's not to say it does not come with its own dangers and limitations. Yeah, thank you, Rosie.
Thanks so much for sharing that. So just a follow-up question on that, because you've talked about the advantages and the pros and cons of this. So can you also share like some tips on how equity distribution can help startups? So basically, are we saying that stock options is just one aspect, or are there other aspects of equity distribution in terms of like helping to hire correctly or retain correctly, or is stock option distribution the only option?
When it comes to equity distribution, I think the most efficient one is stock options, and that's because of various reasons, but the most that plays a big part is tax implications. So you want to give out stock options because you want to avoid any heavy tax burdens that might be implied upon your employees. So the reason why you'd give out equity again to your employees is either as a company you're really early, and so you don't have the financial muscle to offer your employees a huge salary or other benefits such as flexible hours and so forth. So you opt to give them equity for them to have a sense of ownership in the company. And what this does is that it incentivizes the people to want to remain with the company until they see the vision come to completion. Yeah.
Very interesting. Thank you so much for that, Patience. That was very interesting. So I like the fact that we've had a balance so far. Like we've had an equity expert and evaluations expert give us an interesting perspective on this. So now we're going to move on to a fintech expert, our fintech expert in the room, which is Missan. So I mean, first of all, Sparkle being a fintech company, because I know fintech companies are very common these days in, like within the African tech ecosystem. So based on your experience, especially being the head of people and culture at Sparkle, how would you say hiring people and retaining people has affected company? What challenges have you faced typically? And, what are the unique, because I feel like the challenges that African tech companies face are very different from the other challenges that other companies in different continents face. So what are the unique challenges that you face, and have you really gotten around like solving these problems, or finding some form of balance to them? Yeah.
Thanks, Ozzy. That's actually a very great question and something that's very pertinent. I think one of the things that I would talk about, two main things that I've actually found out just in my very short foray into the fintech space. First of all, Sparkle started at the time when, COVID just hit. We literally launched our MVP right in the smack of the pandemic. But one of the things that we noticed during COVID was that, or prior to COVID, was that obviously like people were working regular 9-to-5 jobs, like people were, commuting 5 times a week. And then we went on lockdown and everyone was faced with the reality that, look, work is no longer a place that I go to, but rather like something that I do. And people started rethinking, things around like where they want to work, how they want to work, even why they're actually working. And it just seemed as though there was a mindset shift where people started putting the spotlight on work-life balance, the need for meaningful work, the need to do work in a way that benefits oneself. Employees were starting to choose themselves. It seemed as though like it was, an employee's market. And, the labor market actually supported this because, for instance, like if location is no longer a factor, what you find is that people now have flexibility in terms of, the kind of companies that they want to work for. They're no longer limited by their location, for instance. Like it's easy for them to find companies, find employment even outside the shores of where they live. I remember vividly, like early 2021, when I was trying to headhunt like engineers, and I remember getting shut down within like 2 seconds of DMing someone saying, hey, our company is great. This is what we're doing. We're trying to build this, blah, blah, blah. And then the next thing the person said is, yeah, like I hear what you said about your company. You're great, but do you offer remote work? And as soon as I said no, that was the end of the conversation, and they weren't, willing to listen to me. So I mean, it was like a huge shock to me at the time. But then again, it just made us, start rethinking things around like what do we define as work, and how can we accommodate like these new groups of workers and new working preferences. Another very pertinent thing that I found out in the African continent is, economical situations. And what you're finding right now is that, globally, like everyone is dealing with rising inflation rates. Like there's, talks about recession, and specifically in Nigeria, and I can speak about Nigeria because that's where I live. For the past 5 to 10 years, like people have been seeking opportunities to, better their economic situations. So I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but in Nigeria, like it's characterized by, we have very high unemployment rates, and there's also like, insecurity issues that people are dealing with. So what's happening is that you find that we're dealing with massive brain drain. So people are leaving the country in droves to find better opportunities outside of the country. They're even exploring opportunities remotely where they could, up to 100x, 200x their income. So basically what we're finding out is that it's 10 times harder to attract talent. It's 10 times harder to retain people. And that's because you're no longer competing with, for instance, for us, say 3 to 5 years ago, if you ask me who our competitors were, we'd probably say, the Flutterwaves or the Paystacks of, Africa. But right now, basically our competition is everybody. It's the PayPals, it's the Squares, it's the Stripes of the world. Those are the companies that are stealing, or I would say like taking our talents. So because the world has become like very competitive, I think tech companies, especially like companies that are in a very niche space, such as the fintech space, we need to be very creative when we think about like retention. And for us, like what we've tried to do is that we've started thinking beyond just, oh, hey, we're offering the best, highest, or we're going to start paying in dollars, or we're going to start offering much more equity, or we're going to have such an amazing work environment for people to work. I don't think that necessarily in Nigeria that Nigerian companies can actually win the war on talent. I don't think that that's possible. And that's primarily because the pull factors, the factors that are pulling people away from Africa, are much stronger than the push factors. So these are factors that are beyond the company's control. So for me, I think that what we've had to do is just try to be a bit more, like creative around like what we can do to retain people. So what we're finding is that obviously, that people are migrating out of the country. Okay, what do we need to do to make sure that we have, a pool of talents in-house? And one of the things that we're doing is, making sure that we are offering flexibility. So flexibility in terms of work, flexibility even in terms of the type of contracts. So for instance, we know that, people are moonlighting nowadays. You have people who are working for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 companies at the same time. You just have to embrace it. That's the reality of today's work. And if you want to be able to, have these talents in your talent pool, you need to be able to accommodate these types of employees and giving them, different types of contracts. and say, hey, let's agree on you giving me 4 hours of your time just so you can work with me. That's the only way you can have talents within your pool. And for the people who haven't left your company yet and aren't considering, migrating, I think it's very important that employees are very intentional about how they're engaging their employees and thinking about the entire employee experience from even right before they join the company, right down to beyond. So from how you're onboarding your employees, how you're, thinking about compensation. I have a lot of thoughts around, compensation and what it should actually look like, but I think I'll just stop here for now. But essentially, this is pretty much what we've had to kind of change our mindset on in terms of having to retain and even attract employees for our fintech startup.
Thanks so much, Miss. And that was actually a very interesting perspective. For one, I really do think that the JAPA season, it's upon us, and the pressure is intense, right? Because I was going to say Western, but I'm like, let me just keep this serious. But this is actually a very, very serious problem, because it's serious because we've had situations where products have actually gone dark because a whole technical team left the country. How does an employer deal with that situation? This is a real life problem. Companies are having to face this every day. We're talking about big companies. How much more the earlier stage companies, the smaller companies? How are they managing to survive when they're dealing with heavy competitors? How does a 2-year-old Nigerian fintech startup or Kenyan fintech startup compete with a PayPal? How do you deal with that? If your CTO wakes up and says he's leaving the company because he's been offered a fat check in Canada, how do you want to compete with that? So this is a very, very interesting perspective. And I really like what Mason has said about flexibility. Flexibility is very important. I, for one, I know I'm making reference to when I first started working, because I had it was really intense. My earlier working days, I was working in a bank. My work hours were crazy. I did not have time for myself. And to think that I'm living in a world where people can sit at home and have employment in 4 different companies, it's amazing, because it's I just need to do my work. So I really like the fact that we're having all these conversations. And please, if you're in the audience, you have questions, please do not hesitate to share your questions, share your opinions in the chat. We're really open to having these conversations with you as well. So please don't feel left out. You can still make your contributions. There'll also be a Q&A session shortly after. So now I'm going to be moving to a question I have for Mason. We're definitely going to come back to this unique African hiring problems and retention problems, but I'm going to be moving forward to asking Danai her question now. So Danai, you've heard everything we've said. You've heard Dan give his 2 cents on what people basically need to do, how they need to position themselves, in terms of doing valuations and also hiring and also distributing equity the right way, especially in terms of stock options, and basically just tackling all these challenges. So what would you say are the right steps that we need to take? Because I like the fact that, you're working in a company like The Room. Definitely, you're not new to the challenges that African companies face. So what tips could you share with us at this time? Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for that. So I think I want to start off from where Misan left off. I think there's a weird shift that's currently happening in the market right now, and that's mainly being affected by economics, right? A lot of the startups, when you think about global startups, they had all these conversations going on around maybe they were overvalued, now the market is correcting, and then there's inflation, all these different things that are happening, which essentially actually just mean that people who previously had job security don't have that anymore. And what that has happened is, I think as of 2 months ago, I was hearing Misan and I was like, this all sounds so familiar. All these problems, I have experienced them. There was actually a Google sheet that was going around from people that were laid off in a number of startups, and it actually had their contact information. And basically somebody decided they would start this to say, if you are looking to hire someone, just go into this Google Sheets and you can find people. So I think there's that interesting shift that is happening. So what that means for us as well, when I'm thinking about the startup environment, is even though I think we're competing against big tech, so Google, Microsoft, the Kenya market right now, it's terrible. There's also that leverage that's coming because it's becoming less of a candidate market just because of the way things are shifting. But I think opportunity exists for us as well to do like meaningful partnerships. I think one conversation that we're having at the room with our GM, who's also very plugged into the Nairobi market, is a lot of startups are thinking about ways to partner with organizations that do tech training. With that in mind, what they're doing is, okay, I get these young engineers and then I just train them and I bring them into my organization. Because what you find though is even though there are global opportunities because the workforce is more remote, nobody wants to hire a junior engineer from the jump because you want to deliver and deploy your product right now. But when you're in a startup and you can't afford to pay Google salaries, you can be creative, right? And say, maybe I'll hire 4 junior developers and I'll just hire 1 senior guy and figure out how we do the upskilling and training. And then potentially, do you find an organization, not tooting the room here, that does continuous development and you find a way to continue to upskill your talent? And what other programs can you do for your talent in order to keep them more plugged in and keep them growing? Because part of it is people want to earn more, but people also want to see that they have the probability to earn more in the future. And they can see that based on the way they can see growth progression for them. So I think those are like some things that we really need to think about as we're thinking about what to offer our people beyond the monetary value, because the market is going to be tight for a little bit longer. So all those inflated data tech salaries that potentially went very high are going to also come and self-correct. So there's a huge opportunity for all of us to see how we can navigate that. I digressed a little bit, but I just wanted to add my 2 cents there. So now I think I'll talk a little bit more about processes. Okay, you figured out how to select, how to attract and bring in these people, but what is your thought around how you actually select? Because there's a lot of talent out there. How do you know what good looks like? I think as an organization, it's very important to also think about what your values are, what matters to you as you're doing your hiring, because that defines what process you do. So the process Ms. Sun does at Sparkle could fundamentally be different from what I am doing at the room. And that's because what I'm prioritizing at any given time is very different. So almost understand your why and the thing that drives you. And from that, be able to be like, then these are the things that are important to me. So like at the room, for example, I don't hire anyone into the organization without them doing an assignment, because it's just the belief that some people speak well, but it doesn't necessarily translate to results. Whereas other people are a bit more introverted, but they can actually get the job done. So the assignment is a core part of how we do our selection process. And culture is a core part. So even if you can do the job, you're a skilled engineer, for example, if you are just not a culture fit, we can't let you into our organization because that will have implications on the culture that inadvertently affect the people that we already have who are excited to work in the organization. So it's almost very important to think about those little things that you think are important. And then you work backwards from that and be like, okay, based on the things that we value, what is the process we can design to create this experience we want?
Very interesting. Thank you so much for that, Danai. I feel like a student. I've learned so much. What I really did find interesting was the perspective you shared about training staff. It brings my attention to the model that Andela ran a few years ago. Training junior staff, basically getting them up to speed. And then they really did create like a pool of senior engineers in Nigeria, in Kenya, and those senior engineers went on to become very, 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 very big engineers in different companies. So they basically exported stuff. I'm not saying that that's what every company needs to do, but that is an interesting strategy that I think companies can take on. The only question now is every company going to be in a position where they can afford to do that, like payment-wise, because of course these partnerships will mean they will convert to money eventually or some form of benefits regardless. So I think that's a very, very interesting perspective. But before I keep talking, someone from the audience, Gertrude, actually wanted to say something. So Gertrude, I'm going to allow you to speak now. So please feel free to share your opinion or your question. You can unmute yourself now. I've allowed you to speak. Just one that more second. Can you hear me, Gertrude? I'm guessing maybe we can just chill on that. I've enabled him speak. I'm guessing when him or her is able to speak, they will unmute themselves. But I really do like how the conversation is going on right now. Okay, someone else has actually said, so, okay, there's a message from Gertrude on the chat. While I go through that, I'm just going to allow Victor Owu to talk now. So please unmute yourself. Yeah.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Okay, hi. So it's nice to be here. Hi, Miss Anne. How are you doing?
Hello, hi, Victor.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, I just have a contribution as regards to retaining top talent, especially in the tech space. And my thoughts is to conduct periodic stay interviews, for our talent or for the manpower that we have. We shouldn't wait to the point where these guys are we shouldn't wait to the point where these guys are about to leave. Then you now have that conversation of, okay, so what do we do for you to stay, right? So we should always, like, as recruiters or as tech recruiters or as HR professionals, we should always have this culture of conducting periodic stay interviews and say, okay, so what has made you stay up to this point? What can we do better to make you stay longer, right? Instead of having that turnover problem. Many companies are facing that in this present age because of the globalization and what COVID has caused again, right? So I think conducting periodic stay interviews is extremely important. It makes the workforce, or it makes the employees know that they are part of a functioning whole, and their role is very. Did you hear what I said? Sorry.
Yes, we did. I heard you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm done. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Victor. I think I like the perspective you brought about not waiting, till an employee is about to leave before you have all these conversations. That's very important. But I'm just curious to know, are you sharing from a personal experience as a founder or as an employee?
As an employee, as an employer actually, or let me see, as a HR or a technical recruiter. Yeah, so I work with a startup, and so we always have this issue of engineers wanting to leave because they have better options, right? I mean, it's already a global space. You can work with an American company from the comfort of your house, and so somewhere in Lekki or whatever in Nigeria, right? So we always have that issue of engineers saying, oh, I have another employer that is giving me like 3x or 4x what I'm earning here, so I'm not staying. I have to leave, and there's nothing you can do about it. So before that happens, right, you should always have that conversation with them periodically, probably every quarter and stuff. Of course, talent will still want to leave whenever they want to leave. Yeah, you can't put a gun to them and say, hey, stay back. They always want to leave, right? But there are measures you can put in place, to reduce turnover. Yeah. So. Yeah.
Very, very amazing. I really like that perspective, arresting the problem before it comes to, shooting in the foot. I really like how that sounds, because at least even if you're not able to keep them from leaving, you're at least informed ahead of time that, that person is probably going to leave at some point. So you're well prepared. You're not in a position where you're surprised or you're taken by surprise. Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing and offering to speak, Victor. We really do appreciate that. Also, just encouraging other people from the audience, so please feel free to share your opinions or ask questions that you have. I'm going to go ahead now to share a question from Mekia Stesema. So the question goes, can hiring junior employees work as an inversion for a startup company? Throwing this to anyone in the panel. That's the first question. The second question is, how can that affect the valuation of a company or a company's financial projections? How is that even measured? So Daniel, this is looking more like a question that you might be geared to ask. So I'll read the question again. So can hiring junior employees work as an inversion for a startup company? If so, how can that affect to the valuation of a company or a company's financial projections? And how is that even measured?
Yeah, it's it's interesting. It's a good question, because then you're missing all the sort of brand value, right? Of people that have previous experience, and they have you cannot put the Google logo on the team slide and things like that if you're hiring more junior. I think in general, like, what helps the valuation is what helps the company. So again, is the same story. If hiring junior employees is the best option, either because of impossibility of hiring more senior because of international competition or whatever reason, or because just that there are 100 things to do that don't require senior people, maybe if that's the best option for the company, is also gonna be the best option for the valuation as well. Another thing that I wanted just on what was said so far was like another interesting way of defense, not against the other startups, but at least against the giants, right? Against the Googles and things, is that the whole equity return is made at an early stage, right? So if you get stock options in Google right now, or even like 5 years ago, you're pretty much not moving the needle on your own private funding, let's say. But if you do get into those companies that have the potential to be very large, and you get maybe a larger than average equity compensation percentage, that's where you could potentially make the difference for yourself. And I think African startups have shown in the past 5-6 years that they can go huge. Like, there isn't a difference in growth potential for national startups, national meaning in African countries, versus international startups anymore. I don't think US startups still have a little bit of an advantage in terms of maybe potential in terms of percentage that gets to be that large, but again, at that point, it becomes about selecting the right one and having also the luck of being an employee in the early stages of one of these companies that goes very large. But at least that's a little bit of a weapon that we can use against people that can pay 3x the salaries, right?
Yes, definitely. That is one point that we have over them. Yes. So thanks again for sharing that interesting perspective, Dan. I'm just wondering, please feel free to let us know if that answered your question. If you have a follow-up question, feel free to put that again in the Q&A section. We'll be happy to answer it. So before we move forward, I actually just wanted us to just take a step back. I know Miss Ann said was sharing a lot about the unique challenges faced, and she basically didn't want to dwell too much on it. So I'm just wondering if Miss Ann, you're able to go back and cover that, or do you think you've exhausted the points?
Yeah, I'm more than happy to do that. I think basically everyone has spoken about very interesting ways in which we could attract and retain employees. But I also wanted to talk more about compensation and what startups can actually do regarding compensation. I think first and foremost, one of the things that I would say in terms of compensation and benefits, and what I think is a future of compensation and benefits, is taking into consideration the fact that people want different things. And I see a lot of companies, especially young startups, saying, I think we should offer X, equity to our employees. I think we should offer this amount of pay. I think we should offer them, health benefits, whatever the case may be, without actually taking into consideration what people actually really want. You have to look at, first of all, your context. So for us, for instance, we're operating in Nigeria. And this is me just having done research for the past 2 years. We recently just launched our employee stock option scheme. And one of the things that we're realizing is that the people who really cared about stock options in our company were people who actually started the company. So people who were the very early stage employees. Those were the people who were very much invested in the company. They built the company from scratch. So obviously they had more they had more to gain, obviously, like from, staying with the company and, having their stock options within the company. But what we noticed is that the younger employees that joined afterwards were not so keen on, stock options. And that could be for a myriad of reasons. One of the reasons could be that a lot of people prefer liquidity to, having to think about like your options vesting in 5 years or 4 years or 3 years or whatever the case may be. For some employees, depending on the stage that they're currently at, like Danai mentioned. So if you're a very early stage employee, you're just starting out in your career, for someone like that, pay is very important to you. So you would want obviously more pay. If you're more senior in your career, more established, you're more willing to take risks. You're more willing to, take a pay cut just to get more equity. So again, it's just really understanding that you would have different calibers of employees within your organization, but you need to be able to be flexible around compensation and tweak it in a way that attracts whoever it is you want to join your organization. So for me, I think we need to really start thinking about, for instance, like, I know recently, like Spotify announced something that was really mind-blowing, where they announced that now what they're trying to do is that they're giving their employees every month the opportunity to tweak their compensation based on what works for them using a platform that they created. So on that platform, if this month you feel like, liquidity is important to me, you would have like more net pay and less of your equity. And for me, I think that that's very mind-blowing. I'm not really sure how it works exactly, because I'm not really sure, what that means in terms of the cap table and all of that. But I think essentially, like, it's just the idea around like giving people the flexibility of choice. And I'll give an example. For instance, like, say health insurance, what a lot of companies do typically, like when they're trying to think about benefits, especially with HR professionals, is that they maybe do surveys, they run surveys, they ask their employees, what do you want? Can you choose the HMO that works best for you? And then employees choose, or they drill down, down to like maybe 2 or 3 healthcare providers that they want. And then people just, I guess, like the employers would pick like maybe what's best for them in terms of cost, and then just pick between 1 or 2 healthcare providers. But what you're missing out on is the fact that there might be employees who might have like disabilities, or might have like certain health defects that may not necessarily be able to use these healthcare providers, and they might need like specialists to be able to care for their health. And essentially what you've done is that you've paid, for these health benefits for these employees, but they're not using it. So what's happening is that you're wasting a lot of money in terms of paying for benefits, or, buying certain things that employees are never going to use in your company. I see a lot of times like hundreds of thousands of dollars like of benefits being unused year after year, because employees still don't understand that, you need to be able to give people flexibility of choice. In our company, one of the things that we realized was, even in terms of learning and development, we noticed that people wanted to, for instance, be able to pick what courses they wanted. So before, like, we would choose between, like, say, maybe a Pluralsight to give to our senior engineers and say, hey, you guys look for courses on Pluralsight or Udemy or whatever the case may be. But what we realized was that there were people who were, interested in maybe some courses that were not necessarily on Pluralsight. So you paid for a Pluralsight business, what they call a platform, and people are not using the benefits. So what we did was that we created, or we actually paid for a platform that, what we did was assign a budget to each employee, and then giving everyone virtual cards to be able to access whatever course it is in the world that they wanted to access. So that way it gives them flexibility and freedom of choice. And what we found out was that people were now like more, because they had more agency, it was easier for them to say, hey, I want to buy a book. We saw an uptick in learning and development because people were now like, picking courses that they actually liked, and they were not forced or limited by a specific platform. So for me, that's how I think we should start thinking about compensation in terms of retaining and attracting employees, thinking about what works for an employee. When you're asking an employee to join your company, ask them what they care about. Like, do they care about equity? Do they care about their pay? What do they care about? If you have a specific budget for the employee, be willing and able to be flexible to tweak that budget to be able to work for that specific employee. So not changing the amounts per se, but it's just changing what they get in total. So if you have like a specific amount of gross pay that you want to assign to an employee, saying, okay, how much of that do I want to be the net pay? How much of that do I want in equity? How much do I want in, other benefits and things like that? So that's just my 2 cents around like compensation.
Very, very interesting 2 cents. Honestly, I think I would be delighted to work in a company that would let me just, have all these options. I think it's almost like COVID was like the magic wand that just changed the workforce and how things work, because it's like we have all these options now. Yes, things became difficult. Yes, competition increased, but at the same time, it gave us the ability to be able to think outside of how we saw work. I never for one day thought that I could think about work and think about all these other amazing opportunities and, a different way to approach work. Because if I'm thinking about the fact that I have the ability to select the courses I want to do, if I'm able to be empowered in such a way that, because sometimes people think about all these things, how they want to level up, how they want to grow their careers, but then they think about money. It's like, where's the money going to come from? Who's going to pay for that? But if that option is there, then that's amazing. And then you have situations where your company, that your company is in partnership with some training company, and you probably know that the courses they offer is just not what you're interested in. It just doesn't hold much value as to what you want. So I feel like giving employees the option is that is the empowerment that people are looking for. Yes, money is good, but a lot of times the money that people get in their paycheck is gone even before the salary ends. As I see people saying that money that I'm going to get tomorrow, I've already spent it. The money is not there because they have like a list of things they're doing. So if your company is saying to you that, listen, I'm apportioning all these things for you as part of your benefits, like, yes, I'm not giving you the cash, but this is something that you're guaranteed to have, by virtue of working here, whether it's pensions, whether it's an insurance, whether it's a training, whatever the case may be, it is an amazing benefit. I think I was in conversation with someone the other day, and the person was saying to me that their company pays for their transport to the office. I'm just like, that's amazing. Yes, and it's a hybrid situation. So they don't necessarily go to the office every day, but when they do come to the office, there's the option of getting like your Uber paid for you. Amazing. In Lagos, that is gold, because that everybody knows, like, transport is difficult. Even people who have cars don't always want to drive. So all these creative measures that people, companies are making and creating to make life easier for their employees, I think it's amazing. I'm so happy about how conversations have gone today. We've so far been able to talk about so much in such a short time. I'm just wondering if anyone else has any other points to share. Patience, Danai, Daniel, anyone wanting to just drop in a few more cents, we'll be happy to hear from you. Patience, were you raising your hand?
I wasn't, Ozzy, but I think maybe something that I can add to the conversation when talking about equity and just defining certain cultures when it comes to equity distribution is reevaluating traditional designs. I know initially some of the panelists talked about, compensation not being enough, but then when you look at equity distribution as well, it's not exactly 100% tool that's going to be successful when it comes to retaining talent. So you have to really reevaluate the design with which you're distributing that equity to your employees. So whether it's the cliff periods or the vesting schedules, as a company, you really need to go into discussion as to how you want to go about it, because we know that the traditional measure is 4 years, but then we've seen companies coming up like Lyft and Stripe that within the first 1 year, everything has vested, and you can, as an employee, you can exercise the shares. But then the danger of that is that early exercise comes with tax implications. So it's really hanging in the balance. You really can't know which way to go. It's all about discussing with your lawyers and your accountants which measure would actually be most beneficial to your employees. Again, Nissan spoke about junior employees not wanting to stay in a company just because you're giving them equity. And that is true, because when they're looking at it, they're thinking, this shares are probably going to vest over 4 years. Do I have time for company for 4 years? Or can I just, stay for a while and move on to another company that's going to pay me better, give me more benefits? And so as a company, there's really a lot of conversation that needs to take place when it comes to the equity plan designs. So yeah, I think that's what I really wanted to add to the conversation.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much for that. I, for one, I think a bit of both would be perfect as an employee myself. Having stock options, having a good salary, having the a whole lot of options would be great for me. Yeah, really interested. So I'm hoping the Race HR team is listening to this conversation right now. So just to move further down the line, so far we've been able to cover so much. We'll just be sharing a link to get feedback from you, our lovely audience. Once again, thank you so much for joining this session. It's really been an exciting and empowering one. I feel like I know more already. So without further ado, I think maybe we can just think about drawing concluding conversations. For me, I think I'm just going to summarize a lot about what I've heard today. I think the very first thing that we need to learn, or that I would say that I have learned on this session, is get creative. If I were to start a company today, I wouldn't just think about wanting to pay my employees like the highest salaries in the market. I'm going to think about actually hearing from them as to what they need. What benefits would they like to receive aside, getting a high salary or being paid better? What are the options that, they would like me as an employer to consider when I think about paying them? That's one. Two, also thinking about the unique situation we have in Africa today, like coming up with creative measures that would actually help you get ahead as an employer. I really like what Victor said about, not just waiting till the situation has gotten tough, being in a position where you've actually arrested the problem way before it becomes complicated, way before it becomes a situation where you're literally chasing your staff or a whole department exits your company. So I feel like these are very, very interesting points. I'm really so grateful to the entire panel for, contributing to these conversations, and the audience as well. So we've shared the feedback link. I'm just curious. So following the conversation we've had today, our able panelists, what kind of topics would you, be interested in hearing or, talking about in the future? Just tentatively, I would really like to get your feedback. We're still going to get feedback from the audience as well, but I'm just curious because, these are important conversations that we need to have in the ecosystem. This is pertinent because, of course, this is a challenge that a lot of companies are facing in the now. So I'm just curious about, further conversations that we could possibly have, to address this kind of problems. Yeah.
Maybe just for me, I think it's super interesting to get into the details of these things, right? We talked about different hiring processes, like some things, like some ideas that we got and some details that we got, I think were amazing. Like the idea of flexibility, people doing 4 jobs, going with the wind on those things instead of against, like having those specific experiences, but also the finding the commonalities across different companies on those. I think it's super interesting. So yeah, thanks for that. It was a takeaway for today, and I'd love to hear more about that.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Dan. I was actually very excited about that. But you're right. These are conversations that I don't think we need to stop there. Even if we may not be able to, have this conversation, a follow-up conversation immediately, or even have like, should I say like a 1 to 3 step guide on how to move forward, like on how to hire people, how to come up with all these witty ideas like Misan and Danai have shared. I still think that like, we need to keep the conversation going as much as possible. I think on our own part, what we will be doing is making sure that this conversation reaches as many people as possible, right? So following this event, we're going to be sharing the recordings with everyone, like from the panelists to those who registered for the event, just so that you are able to access the knowledge that we've shared here. That is the purpose of having conversations like this, where the entire community is enlightened on better ways to perform, better ways to run our business, better ways to grow the ecosystem such that everyone is benefiting from each other. We're not just, just running businesses independent of one another. So definitely these ideas will be shared. They'll be available also on our media profiles and also on YouTube as well. So just be on the lookout for it. As you know, we're always ready to offer help and solutions to you. We are a fundraising and equity management platform. But before I just go ahead and do a closing conversation, someone has raised their hand, so I'm just going to let them speak. Yeah, Jackson.
Afternoon, guys. Interesting conversations, great insights that I'm picking from you guys today. The purpose of me joining was to learn. I would like to say I'm Jackson, I'm from Kenya, and to add on to the larger conversation of how to retain talent, I'm a talent manager at Kiosk Digital Services, which is an e-commerce platform or for retailers. So one thing that I've been able to do with the team here is have a shared mindset. That connects to the culture of the organization. So when you have employees who buy in into what the organization and the vision is doing as well, I find when you hire people who have a purpose, people who are driven, people who take accountability. Somebody in the panel earlier said people who love to work with ambitious people. That's one of the employee value propositions I sell here, because I've been able to recruit people who are very ambitious, people who want to grow. So how do you connect that to the employees when you're in the employee journey, employee experience as well, and have that shared mindset, not just of the company to win alone, but everybody to win as a whole as well. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Jackson. I think that is also a very, very important thing to note. Having matching mindsets. I think Danai had touched on that, but I don't think she really threw more light on this aspect as much. So I think just to contribute to that, one other point I'd like to share is when you create a product that people believe in, more people tend to be more driven when they're working. So for example, I personally find it difficult to work in a space or in a position where I don't feel a connection to the service being offered. So for example, if I don't personally believe in that the product is a great product, or if I don't believe that is, offering any kind of solution, I find it difficult. That's not to say that that's the same for everyone, but I think that that's an interesting, an interesting perspective, hiring people that have a similar vision to, the founding vision of the company, ensuring that their ideas align with one another. And I really feel like that's something that would really contribute to how long, the staff you hire stays at the company. But so far, it's really been such an interesting session today. I'm really grateful for everyone who's taken their time out to join. As mentioned previously, the recording will be made available to everyone who registered, everyone who joined the session today, and we'll also host it on our social media platforms as well as YouTube. So once again, thanks so much, everyone. We're really appreciative of the time you've taken out, especially our panelists, Danai, Misan, and Daniel. We're really so grateful for your support and cooperation on this session. It's really been great working with you all. I'm hoping this is not the last time we get to work together. I'm hoping that there'll be more opportunities, more conversations. So I'm really looking forward to it. Please take time out to fill the feedback form so we can serve you better, create more beneficial events where everyone, contributes to and learns from. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Okay.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Have a good
Thanks,
one.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.